Hello and welcome to Empower Radio. I'm Wendy. The show is Conscious Living. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate your time. Thanks for listening today. Hope you're having a great day wherever you are and whatever you're doing. Got some great energy to add to the mix for you here. This is a project that I think that is really indicative of what everybody's trying to do. They talk about shifting and trying to focus on better things and more proactive and positive solutions that incorporate both old wisdom and new knowledge, and I guess take us to a higher level of what we think we know and what we are already focused on, without leaving behind things that might have gotten us to this point and learning from that as well. My guest is part of a new group for me. A new discovery on Facebook. You know how that works. The Heart of the Healer Foundation is what I found. And I really thought it was a great idea, a great opportunity. And they're having a gathering coming up here in August. We'll see how that goes because it's in Colorado. But one of the folks who's behind this is Jeffrey Schmidt, and he's Dr. Schmidt, I should say. And he's here with me now. We're going to talk about that. Hi, I haven't talked to you before, and I'm so glad you have time to share with us what's going on about this. Thanks for your time today.
Well, delighted to be here, Wendy. Thanks so much for your interest in our event coming up. We're very excited about the offering and the convergence of great minds and hearts that are coming together for exactly the reasons that you were speaking.
Okay, and I want to find out a little bit more about you. When I was reading your bio, I'm looking at this, and pioneered synthetic methodologies for bioactive lipid mediators. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness gracious, this is you've done some real amazing work here. Now, half of it though is medicalese. So could you, in a nutshell, condense some of that?
Well, I think the simplest way to put context around it is that I am a Gemini through and through, and seem to have perpetually lived in two worlds my entire life. And I am a research scientist and an entrepreneur, and I also am the chair of the Heart of the Healer Foundation's board, and have been practicing and advocating various esoteric and sacred healing and art forms for the better part of my life. So I consider myself a bridge builder. I am very interested in trying to further the cause of indigenous wisdom and healing practices. I think Wade Davis, in his TED Talk a few years ago, really said it right when he coined the term ethnocide, that with great impunity the world is sitting by idly as the world's cultural diversity is being destroyed, and oftentimes it's the most threatened and vulnerable cultures that hold the greatest solutions and promise and wisdom about how human beings can live in balance on the earth. And so one of the things that the Heart of the Healer Foundation so strongly advocates and supports is the furtherance of indigenous wisdom and practice for these very practical reasons, that we must turn to the body of sacred wisdom and knowledge that have kept human beings in balance and alive on the earth for so long, in order to help ourselves get out of this mess. There's a deep grain of techno-fetishism throughout the planet. People that are in leadership positions mostly tend towards technological solutions for how to create the preferred human future. And what our value proposition is, that it's not only innovation and technology that's going to keep us from certain oblivion. It is a sacred remembrance of our place in the natural order, and a remembering of who we are, and a restoration of relationship between ourselves and the living planet. So that's one of the things that I am very passionate about, is using my grounding in the sciences and in research to hopefully communicate to a broad audience why technology isn't the only solution.
Okay, what I wanted to condense it, I'll use a part of your background to kind of to demonstrate that both world thing, because that's what I found so extraordinary in your resume. During your tenure, and they're talking about this, and I'm reading from your bio, you established the Bent Creek Institute, and it's home to North America's first plant, seed, and tissue bank. And it's dedicated to plants and fungi of medicinal interest. Okay, well, combine that with what you also have done in terms of developing an extensive drug discovery platform using techniques like pattern recognition and quantum molecular dynamics. Okay. That kind of, to me, marries those two of this is what we have at our beck and call if we don't destroy it. And this is where we can go with that when we combine it with our current methods of science and beyond where we're learning and where we're growing. So to me, that's like, oh, incredible the way you have basically dovetailed the two together.
Well, you're too kind. The Bent Creek Institute effort actually was an effort on the part of the North Carolina State University system to help bolster the economy of the western part of our state. And one of the things that we've focused on, the Asheville area being one of the hotbeds for integrative medicine in the U.S., the community there sports 1 to 2% of the entire nation's integrative medicine workforce. We wanted to create a framework that would help the grassroots economy be strong, and a lot of that grassroots economy was around herbal medicines and natural healing, and we recognize that our extraordinarily diverse ecosystems in that part of the state, which are probably in the top 3 in terms of biodiversity, UNESCO biodiversity hotspots for sure, were under threat from anthropogenic climate change, and we recognized that there was no repository for plants and seeds of medicinal interest anywhere in North America. So we established this repository, partnered with the Doomsday Nordic Doomsday Vault, so all the seeds and accessions are being stored there as well. And we figured that would be a long-term service to the community. To make a very long story short about drug discovery and pattern recognition, I am an inventor, and I really enjoy a field called systems biology. And what we were trying to do there was address the terrible situation that developing new therapies finds itself in. It right now costs around $1 billion to get a new drug to market. And one of the reasons is because it's so very complicated to predict how substances, whether they're natural or artificial, interact with the human body. So what we did was develop a computer platform using all sorts of supercomputers and very interesting mathematics to try to predict more accurately how a new substance would interact with the human body, with the hope that failing and prototyping in the computer would be much less expensive than the way things are done now. So that's
amazing.
Short answer to that.
Okay. Well, also what it says, and there are some people that I know dealing with cancer right now, and so what I homed in on was that you are also trying, with your background, you have this. It seems like very appropriate requirements that it takes to work on this, but you're trying to develop a novel cancer therapeutics that target fatty acid synthase. And now, is this like what? When you start doing something like this, do you have funding for it? Do you find somebody who's willing to front you on that, or you just go, because as an entrepreneur, sometimes that isn't always possible, but it sounds like an incredible approach. Right.
Well, we are funding that research mostly through federal grant programs, and we found my colleague Stephen Kreidel made the discovery that a particular pharmaceutical that was already on the market had some effects on a piece of machinery in the that exists in cancer cells and embryonic cells, not normal adult cells. If you fiddled with that machinery, you would kill the cancer cells. So what we have done is started a discovery project trying to target that machinery with the idea that we would have very mild and non-toxic therapy agents, because normal cells wouldn't recognize the substances because they don't have that protein target. So, but it's as most cancer research, it's humbling, extremely difficult, and extremely frustrating. You are doing very well if 1 out of 10 things you try actually works.
Well, that's the thing, though. We continue to learn more and grow more and find other resources that didn't exist, such as the science, the technology in terms of the math and science. It's now just taking us beyond anything we were doing 40 years ago.
That's very true. There is a lot of innovation, there are a lot of amazing things happening in the sciences and life sciences right now. But the fundamental question remains, and it's one that I believe is desperate for attention and debate and deep consideration by folks ranging from policymakers to noted scientists, and that is, what is this innovation really doing for us? Is it improving the human condition? Is it leading to more awakened existence on the planet? Or is innovation and the new technologies and innovations that are coming out, are they just sort of perpetuating our deep condition of imbalance? I believe that we're still in the phase of being pretty enamored with technology, and we don't I don't think we are questioning enough what the consequences are of employing and utilizing new technologies and innovations. A great example is nanotechnology. Amazing things are happening in the area of nanotechnology, the ability to build machines at the molecular level and new constructs to do interesting things. But, a specific example is that, there's all kinds of very novel efforts to use these small, ultra small machines with new properties and abilities that we've not seen before in the human body. Yet we have absolutely no idea about how nano materials are going to interact with the human body, and it's going to take literally a Marshall Plan to really bring understanding to that. Yet there's so much momentum, inertia, might I say, around that because of the positive effects. It's we see so many classical social trap examples happening where the very positive intentions of a very few oftentimes are backfiring and creating lots of problems for many. Let's agrobiotech, for example. That's one of the most vivid examples that I can cite as well.
Okay, and that would be in terms of doing the genetically modified food sources and things like that, plants, the whole 9 yards?
Indeed.
Okay, so let's get back to the basics. When we're talking about this, and somebody was trying to give me a way of giving a smaller definition, with the Heart of the Healer, the support is for Peruvian shamanism, but it's a way of asking all forms, all types, all backgrounds in shamanic beliefs to come together at this time and honor that history. And with shamanism, it's not about finding something outside the body. It's about going usually within and determining how you can co-create an outcome that is healing. And so it may lead you to something somewhere, but it comes from within first. And is that a good way to assess that?
Oh yes, I think absolutely. I mean, everything that you've said is spot on. Our foundation's founder, Oscar Mario Quesada, who is a world recognized scholar and practitioner of the healing arts of Peru and the Andes, has spent the last 30 years in a dedicated effort to help weave the world's wisdom teachers and practitioners together through through events like our 8th International Gathering at the Shambhala Center next month. The motivation for this is the recognition that and this is sort of follows on very nicely from what we were just saying about the preeminent place of technology and innovation in our industrialized world. Don Oscar's motivation is the recognition that in so many ways through our preoccupation with the physical, with the seen world, with our power to manipulate the physical world through advances in science and technology, and how that has sort of led to this massive machine of supply chain economics, has really led us to forgetting so many dimensions of human experience, and that the foil to that is to strengthen and empower carriers of indigenous wisdom and sacred wisdom through bringing people together and reestablishing this global web of strength. In the Andean traditions, it's believed that there is another worldwide web, and it's called the Seke system. It's very much like a nervous system, and it's an energetic weaving, very much like ley lines, but created by human interaction. A nervous system that connects sacred sites and places of ceremony and sacred work, and that global web is in many ways seen and understood in many ways as a buffer and a way to help the Earth through difficult times. And so as we do these events around the planet, and as people come together from different traditions, this Seke system, this web, is strengthened. So we believe that at the very core of our work and the core of our motivation is around shamanic consciousness. And what does that mean? It's probably easiest to describe that through talking about ceremony and ritual, and those are words that have a lot of baggage in our culture, and a lot of people hear those words and scratch their head or run away. At the very end, it's about the practical broadening of one's consciousness, the ability to stand amidst a field of information, a field of interaction, both seen and unseen, and respond and interact in a more deep and balanced and complete way. So a great book, that probably the best that I've ever read that talks about shamanic consciousness, is William Barrett's The Illusion of Technique, and his historical analysis of this great forgetting is couched in a discussion about bandwagoning of academic communities around new major discoveries in science. And what we see happen time and time again, a new path-breaking theory will come out. Quantum mechanics, logical positivism are two examples that he uses from the past century. And what happens is that the entire community, because there's such a focus on mind and such a focus on the material world, the whole community goes, oh my goodness, this theory is going to explain every dimension of the human experience. And then you see this huge effort aligned around trying to describe and define every aspect of the seen world and human experience through this new discovery. I mean, we see it time and time again. And this causes lots of problems. You know, every discipline has its bound, and that's one of the great, sort of teachings of the old ways in shamanic consciousness, that no matter what practice, no matter what framework that you're engaged in to try to understand the world, that framework has bounds around it, and there are places where your method or framework is never going to fit or match. And one of the things that we forget is that science has boundaries, that there are phenomena and experiences in nature that are perceivable that are not the providence of scientific discourse and explanation. So, sort of back to our foundation and our gathering and our organization's teachings, we are all about helping people remember and restore the birth-given innate ability to work more in balance with the living universe, to understand the unseen world, to make better choices, to live happier lives by learning the tools, techniques, and worldviews of shamanic practice and consciousness.
Okay. I like all of that. We're going to have to take a quick break. So I have to just really quickly reintroduce. We're talking with Dr. Jeff Schmidt. He's on the board of directors for the Heart of the Healer Foundation, and biochemist and computational chemist. All this background for him gives him a real solid basis in science. The one thing when you address the shamanic way of being, and for me, and the ritual being maybe sometimes seen in a negative, but what that does, it's very much like when somebody goes into some kind of a steady and consistent practice. They align themselves with a belief system that gives them a picture or a framework of the world as being in a certain way, so that whenever they come into contact with anything else, they hold that state, they hold that way of being, so that they don't get into a reactionary or emotional state when somebody comes up and says this isn't the way it is. They don't align with it. They don't either fight it or take it in. They just allow it to be whatever that is at that moment. And the shamanic practice, for me, is a way of holding yourself in alignment with your own sense of conscious awareness. Because once you get into that state, then you become much more fluid and fluent in the energetic language of all that is around us. And that's a way for me to define and present that, as opposed to the scientific thing of, well, okay, this fixes that fixes that. And then you have to go fix everything that you unfixed by fixing it with the one thing that was the cure.
Right.
It's like, okie dokie. It sets off a chain reaction of consequences that a lot of times people aren't aware of until they enact the trigger, whatever it happens to be, if it's a medicine or if it's an activity or, even it's an idea. But I wanted to get into this next half hour and go into some of this stuff because I like Don Oscar's messages. He's got the full moon messages that address some of the things that are happening and the alignment of the planet and this shamanic information, this indigenous information, this wisdom that we're bringing to, I guess, greater attention by trying to help people become more knowledgeable about all of that, in addition to our current technological benefits and, I guess, perks is a good way of talking about it. You're listening to Conscious Living on Empower Radio. I'm Wendy Garrett. We'll be back in just a minute. Conscious Living. Hello, I'm Wendy Garrett. This is Empower Radio, and talking today about something that is going on for all of us in terms of creating our reality, a shift in a way of thinking, and maybe bringing more of the old into the new and making it a transcendent experience, and not saying, well, we know it better now, so everything that happened before it isn't good. somehow it didn't work. And rather than doing that, going back and saying what did work and what still works and what might even work better, and then we really bring it through to a higher level. The Heart of the Healer Foundation is having a great, I think, opportunity for people to become part of this process. Their mission is to preserve indigenous wisdom and restore the earth and bring that back into the forefront. So they're having a gathering that's going to be the Keepers of the Flame, and that's in Colorado, August 2nd through the 5th. You're invited, and I'm talking with Dr. Jeffrey Schmidt, who's part of this. He's on the board of directors, and with his very solid background in science, I like that because he brings the best of both worlds, an interest in helping to preserve this wisdom that has a lot more to do with consciousness and co-creation, and the other aspect of us that as we learn to be better conscious creators, then we have a better way of assessing what we're doing and whether it's going to be beneficial in the long term rather than the short term. Does that make sense?
Indeed. It's great to be here with you, Wendy.
What have you... I looked on the website to see what Don Oscar was talking about, and he does the full moon messages. And in one of them that I happened to connect to talked about the shift and how this consciousness is also affected by the planetary cycles and the energy of that. That's a huge dynamic. It isn't, we're much more at the mercy of things that we really have yet to fully understand. But the older cultures, the elders of our planet, they were in tune. They had this all figured out. And so he's bringing some of this in and bringing in the old information. Can you give us a better idea of how to frame that?
Sure, absolutely. Well, without venturing into areas that I know far too little about, suffice it to say that this is indeed from the perspective of planetary positioning and energies a very good time to do intentional work around compassionate social change and about empowering ourselves as individuals and communities to ensure that we have a positive future ahead. And it loops back to the core of shamanic consciousness and practice and ritual. We understand and advocate that when people come together with open hearts and open minds, anchored in strong ritual practice and strong and authentic lineage, that work, like a pebble tossed into a tranquil lake, has an effect that is far broader in range and affect than the place that the pebble encountered the lake itself. The ripple effect goes out and affects us all. There is a much deeper connection that we share with one another in the living world than the sort of materialistic and Newtonian models imply. So when we come together at times like this, with the intention of planetary healing, of walking gracefully in the world as healers and as agents of positive change, that work goes far beyond us as individuals. And that's one of the most remarkable and important and also hard to communicate aspects of why our work is so vital at this particular time. Short of direct experience, many people that walk with us here in the industrialized world have never experienced true, old-style ceremony and never felt the remarkable empowerment and the transformative power of people coming together in these ways. So my challenge to anyone in your audience who is not experienced this, please come be with us at Keepers of the Flame at the Shambhala Mountain Center in early August and experience for yourself why these old ways are so important and so vital and so restoring and transformative.
Well, you've got quite a laundry list, a lineup that's a very well-known, very recognizable names. Barbara Marx Hubbard's going to be there, along with the founder, Don Oscar Miro Casada. Also, I actually know the musical group that's going to be there in Lakesh. They're fabulous. The music that they do is didgeridoo, and it's absolutely wonderful. You feel it. That vibration is just empowering, and releasing those kinds of words seem to fit good. Raymond Moody, who's the expert on the life after death. He's the one who got everybody started looking in that direction to see what else happens besides what we think is happening. The body may not be functioning anymore, but it doesn't mean we aren't as beings, as spirit, as energy. Something else is happening, and he's fascinating to listen to as well. But it's quite a great list for people to go and become more familiar with all the types of personalities and people who are interested in, I think, expanding our horizons and
Indeed.
Looking to that.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think the lineup of people is excitingly diverse. We have people such as Master Bo Wang from China, who's an internal martial artist and a scholar in tradition, the pre-formulary times in Chinese medicine. We have Kat Matlock, who's a yoga educator and expert in the Vedanta. But despite the fact that there's such diversity, there's commonality in this understanding of the value and importance of ritual and ceremony at this time. We all know and believe and practice in our own ways the opening of shamanic consciousness and how it has a positive effect. So you will have the opportunity to experience varied viewpoints and ways of practicing deep ritual and ceremony, and also get to experience the power of bringing together people from these very powerful and learned carriers of wisdom and medicine from so many different traditions. It is a really unique experience to bring people like that together with the understanding of the common underpinnings, with the understanding that we are all really working for the same thing. That's to me what is incredibly tantalizing about this event, to bring people like Barbara Marx Hubbard together with Raymond Moody and others that have such a powerful positive message in medicine. There's a synergistic effect, talking about a big ripple. When we bring these people together in this beautiful energy center in the center of the states, we will be intending and anticipating a really vibrant and strong effect, and just really, really want as many people as possible to participate and be part of it.
Well, in reading the information I have here on the full moon message I wanted to go back to that because a lot of people, they're trying to, how does this relate to 2012? And a lot of the indigenous cultures, they do have some way of referencing this time period. Whether they call it 2012 is irrelevant. They have this unified sense that there is something happening that is greater than anything we have the ability to articulate because of the Earth alignment and the galactic field. Somehow we are in a space that it seems magical in a way, because we don't have words to identify it. But somehow they knew about this, and they're saying that this alignment gives us an opportunity to create some wonderful results that might not have been in our potential before. And they talk about the significant alignment. I've got the dates: 1998. It began in 1998, continues through 2021, which kind of gives you a clue the 2012 thing may not be the end. And then from that, though, it talks about, in terms of consolidating this, it dovetails into our own Native American philosophies that talk about the 7 generations and how important it is that what we do is beneficial to those who come after us. And so that this all comes into play, saying we have the chance to do something now that will leave the world better than we found it in some way, shape, or form. The way that you just integrate that has, it determines whether you want to participate or you want to sit on the sidelines and say, I don't have any power. But I think we do have a lot more power than we give ourselves credit.
Right. And we are at a tipping point, and you have spoken eloquently to the reality that many indigenous cultures understand and appreciate, that this is a time of great, danger and opportunity, and that underlying that is the sort of shared belief that human learning and evolution goes through cycles where we, for a time, are preoccupied and focused with one dimension, and this, our preoccupation has been with the physical, and that the shift, the shift and the arc that we're in is right now going from preoccupation with the external, turning back to focus on the inner world. This is sort of the central, dogma, I believe, in many schools of alchemy, where one takes a cycle around the cosmic egg, I think it's referred to, and we're sitting at that balance point where there's a lot of chaos, and one of the things that Barbara Marx Hubbard helps us understand in really intuitive ways is that in times of chaos, the tendency is for a system to want to go backwards and restore its previous state. We know from chaos theory and systems-based theories that also one attribute in times of chaos is that a very small, appropriately applied stimulus can have a huge impact and a huge effect. It's referred to as the butterfly effect. The flapping of a butterfly's wings on one side of the planet might, cause an avalanche in another part of the planet. In chaotic systems, stated another way, a small tweak can end up with a very big effect. So that makes ever more important and significant events like these, and people coming together in ceremony and the opening of a shamanic consciousness, because we want to move forward. And the more people that are practicing with the intention of elevating consciousness, of one unified humanity living peacefully and in balance on the earth, the more people that are doing that, the more probable is that it's going to happen. And that in this chaotic regime, the good news is that it's probably not going to take as much force and as many people as it would if things were status quo, if things, if we were sitting having this conversation 50 or 100 years ago. So let's come together. Let's make great things happen and chart a course for a positive human future. That's our central message around Keepers of the Flame. Let us be that transformative fire that propels humanity forward in a positive way.
And again, this is the event that's coming forward here. It's the Heart of the Healer Global Community. You can join them at the Shambhala Mountain Center, Red Feather Lakes, Colorado. The date, August 2nd through the 5th. The thing is, I want to ask you, have you had an experience that made you more receptive to that shamanic state, that transcendent place that we can somehow be transported to without ever even trying? It just happens. Have you had something like that helped shift your perspective to really be supportive of this type of event?
Oh goodness! Almost on a daily basis. My life now is so filled with the miraculous and so filled with faith and optimism. I lived for many years bludgeoning my way through life and achievement, purely by force. And I was certainly as my friends think, a fairly nice guy, and was relatively happy, but I, had very little faith and very little connection with anything beyond the seen world. And through a strange turn of events, which we definitely don't have time to get into, I was, first introduced to the internal martial arts, where I had a number of experiences that were of the that were not explainable by Western science, which was definitely something that precipitated certainly a crisis of belief in my younger years, and then finally had the blessing of meeting Don Oscar's community and becoming a student of these practices. And now I'm a student and a practitioner, and have had the great privilege of meeting some of the great healers of Peru and spending time in the jungle with indigenous communities. And I am constantly deeply humbled by the experiences that I have, and by the incredible skill and grace and compassion and humility of these communities. We can learn an awfully lot, and I attribute my sort of happy and successful life, of course, through the support of my family, to reorienting my life and worldview through these practices.
What I think is interesting too, though, when you mentioned the butterfly effect and that awareness, when you really have that transcendent experience, and all of a sudden have to admit that everything that we have is fabulous, but it doesn't explain these other energies that are around us, these things that can cause spontaneous healing, these things that can give us a time shift or give us an experience that somebody is standing in front of you who shouldn't be here. There's no explanation for those kinds of things. But when you start doing those practices, like and you're mentioning I'm not sure if it was Tai Chi or Qigong or what martial arts you did, but that's one way to get a real clue into these kinds of shifts. Aside from having a personal healing from somebody who's an incredible, extraordinary, gifted energy worker, you go into that and you think, we have to change something. And you realize that it doesn't mean that millions of people have to do it. It means that some very focused and talented and creative and driven and gifted individuals can simply align their consciousness, and miracles, because we have no other way of explaining it, happen. And that is what I believe is going to happen.
Exactly. Exactly, and we need it. I mean, even if the environment, the critical situation of the living world weren't a factor, we still, in the industrialized world, remain depressed, sick, estranged, and probably the most medicated cohort in the history of humanity. It is remarkable, despite our physical abundance, just how desperate and empty so many people are. The Pew Center for I believe it's called Religion in the Public published a study last year that essentially showed that 35 million people in America each year are searching and not finding. They're searching for something to fill a place of emptiness in themselves, a place with authenticity, to address the disconnection, to address the sadness and the confusion that modern life often causes. 35 million people are searching and not finding answers through established religion, through community groups, through sort of ad hoc coming togethers of people. And we firmly believe that people are more and more recognizing the need for the kinds of things that the Heart of the Healer and other organizations representing indigenous and shamanic worldview are offering. So we believe that's a very powerful and revealing data point that now is a time. I mean, we tend to believe, and I think this is probably one of the most critical things that I've ever learned that's given me perspective, is that we, as we walk in the world that we live in and inhabit in the industrialized world, our assumption is that is the norm, and that people living in the rainforest and in the high mountains and indigenous communities are the anomaly, the novelty. But in fact, it's the other way around. We on this planet have spent the vast, vast, vast majority of our time and our consciousness living in the ways that others have. The industrialized world is a strange and dangerous anomaly in terms of the arc of human history. And the more we understand and appreciate that, I think the more that we should be willing to change and soberly address what's important and how we prioritize our lives and how what we do is affecting the living world and each other.
I think part of that is that 7 generations. It comes back there. What value do we add by going forward with these wonderful ideas and these wonderful, I hate to say this, but when science, and there's no names, but when the opportunity to create a bomb happened, there was no doubt eventually it would be used. And somehow that seems to be how we tend to play out. As soon as there's an opportunity to create something, it's oh, look, see what I did. I created it, without somebody used it. And I think that's where we're at right now, is looking at our creations and saying, are we accountable for what's going to happen with the result? Even if we don't know, and we're not going to, and we have no intention, what if somebody else does? And that's what we haven't, I think, fully identified when it comes to our creator ability. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what we're seeing, I think, is a natural consequence of something that is very sacred and divine, and that is that the universe tends towards exploring all ways of being. And what the unique position, at least on this planet, of human beings has been is now we've got this thing called a cerebral cortex, which is supercharged and amplified that exploration, and it is high time to temper that. I don't think that it's constructive for us to think about our tendency towards invention and of creation as being a negative, but rather as something that needs to be tempered. It's very much like giving a kid a chainsaw that's too big and that they don't have any experience with, and they're sort of wobbling all around the house, chopping lamps in half and hacking into furniture. It's not that the chainsaw is bad, it's that the wielder is not strong enough and not experienced. I think that's at least in my humble estimation, an analogy for where we're at. There is the natural tendency in the universe to explore all ways of being, and there's, and because of that, there's nothing wrong with it. We just need to temper it. And people who have walked this earth in balance for a very long time have great skill and ability to bring the imprimatur of those tempering skills to bear. That is a practical dimension of shamanic consciousness. Don Oscar often says that you should measure what you're doing in ritual and ceremony by whether or not you can grow corn with it. There is nothing. The thing is, there's nothing outside the practical in true shamanic practice and consciousness. It's all about living gracefully, making better decisions, and creating a happy and balanced lives on this earth walk.
So basically, some great indigenous hindsight might give us some wonderful technological foresight.
Indeed. Indeed.
All right. You want to find out more about Heart of the Healer, go to heartofthehealer.org. I really appreciate your time. Dr. Schmidt, I'm glad you're doing this, and hopefully you'll get some wonderful response, and keep doing it, okay? I'd love to talk with you again about some of those experiences you had, but we have to end today, so thank you for joining me.
Wonderful. Thank you for inviting me. Take care.
I'm Wendy. This is Conscious Living on Empower Radio. Thank you for listening. I appreciate your time as well. Again, heartofthehealer.org. You can find them on Facebook or just do a Google search, and have a wonderful day. Remember, the best thoughts, that's what you create. Good luck.
There's a place where a total stranger will give their blood to save your life. A place where someone you never knew will save your child from drowning. Where someone will give you food and shelter after a flood. That place is called America, where we look out for each other. When you help the American Red Cross, you help America.